So I want to talk to you guys tonight about something that's very important to me, which is the phenomenon of meaningful work. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background, my story, how I came to co-found a company called ReWork with a guy named Evan Walden who's sitting in the audience, and what we do, and then some key insights that we've learned about meaningful work in our work in the last year and a half. So my story is basically like this. I'm from Pittsburgh, and I went to college at the University of Vermont, where I studied sustainability. I studied global human impact, basically looking at issues like climate change, ecological collapse, poverty, malnutrition, all these global issues, and many of them that manifest locally as well, that we've only really become aware of in the last kind of 10 to 20 years in a big way. And I graduated on a mission to find a job and eventually build a career that would let me address some of these issues. I cared about it so much. I was basically trying to find a balance between a paycheck and professional development, and seeing that my work had a real impact on a day-to-day basis. And it was so hard to figure out that balance that I actually had 11 different jobs in my first year after school. So I bounced around a lot. I did everything from outdoor education, leading kind of high school camping trips, to writing business plans and doing grant proposals for nonprofits, to installing rain barrels and doing home energy audits, like this whole wide range of things that all had something to do with sustainability issues. And what I saw was, it was a very uncertain time, it was a lot of stressful in many ways, but also learned a ton. One of my favorite times of my life when I look back on it. What I saw was that I wasn't alone in feeling like I wanted to have my work have a purpose and a meaning that way. And what I noticed was that many of the people who were my age and even a little bit older, who I heard talking about the same kind of ambition or wanting that, I noticed them settling one by one, either taking high-paying jobs that didn't inspire them and saying they'll come back to their passion later, or the opposite, taking low-paying jobs and just sort of resigning themselves that they weren't going to make a lot of money, which I think is also sad. So what happened was I went to graduate school in Sweden, of all places, and just to continue to learn how to be a sustainability consultant. I decided that was what I wanted to do. And when I was in school, I kind of had this realization that I'd spent so long on this journey towards meaningful work and really trying to figure that out, that I actually had started to care more about that. I cared more about people being fulfilled in what they were doing than I did about, directly than about my sustainability work. So I actually applied to the Unreasonable Institute while I was in Sweden. And the Unreasonable Institute is a 6-week social venture accelerator in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I live right now. And so I got in. I got in on the idea of building a company that was going to help people find meaningful work by channeling them essentially into these organizations that are sprung up all over the world. There's now hundreds of thousands, millions of organizations really, who've been founded to address a lot of the same social and environmental challenges that I've been studying. So these are organizations in education, public health, renewable energy, water systems, food systems, like this, it goes on and on. It's amazing, really. So at the Unreasonable Institute, we actually got to learn about how those organizations work. And we figured out that it's true that they have a really hard time finding talent. So it was this weird thing where I was looking, on the one hand, there's all these really smart people who want to do good with their, with their skills. On the other hand, there's these organizations who have trouble finding talent. And we learned how to build a business, we learned how to be entrepreneurs, we learned from experts who, brand experts in design and law and finance and investors and the whole nine. So Evan and I got together a team of people who feel really like in our hearts and in our guts that we live at a very pivotal time in human history. That the evolution of our civilization can go a lot of different ways right now. And as somebody who's spent the better part of my life studying sustainability and issues, I can confirm for you that some of the possible futures are not pretty, but some of them are awesome. And so we see our work is doing our part to shift us to make sure that we reach one of those better futures. And specifically by making sure that the right people get hired by the right organizations at the right time. All right, so what does ReWork actually do? ReWork connects talented people to organizations like the ones I'm talking about. People sign up on our website, it takes like 5 minutes. They tell us what they're good at, what they've accomplished, what they want to be doing, and what kind of impact they care about. And on the other side, and this is people who, marketing, finance, operations, like the whole nine, typically people who are about 25 to 40, so they're people who've had some experience at least a couple years in their careers. And on the other side, we offer recruiting services to nonprofits, social enterprises, corporate innovation centers, impact investors, like any organization who has a mission that goes beyond a financial concern is a potential client of ours. And it's pretty straightforward. We tap people in the talent pool when we're doing searches for the clients. So they don't have to check a job board. Our talent just gets an email that says, hey, looks like you might be interested in this. If so, you can apply. And that's pretty much it. And our clients are around the country and around the world. We operate, people in Seattle, Chicago, DC, San Francisco, Houston, New York, and also around the world. So Pakistan, India, Latin America, Liberia, and Kenya. And the position that we're in is such that as people are kind of waiting in the talent pool until they get tapped, we still want to give value to them. So we convene events, networking events, professional skill building events, things like this. And we're starting to convene this community, and this word gets, as Jen Rubio from Warby Parker said, it gets thrown around a lot. We love that word, and we love the notion of this tribe coming together, and what people share in that tribe is being really good at what they do and really wanting to make sure that their work is going towards a better end. So we're convening that group across the country. And we put this in this interesting position, which is we've talked to about 12,000, we've heard from about 12,000 professionals in the last year and a half, and hundreds of hiring managers and thought leaders in the space, and hiring and recruiting all this. And it's let us see basically how the strategies of the hiring managers and the strategies of the professionals interact. So there's insight there that is what I want to share with you. So the first insight that I want to share is that the general setup for how most people approach their careers is pretty flawed. How many people have seen this before or something kind of like this? Yeah, most people have seen this. So I want to start with this because I think that actually both of these images are pretty wrong. The second one is better than the first because it acknowledges that things are messy, but that's pretty much where the benefit ends. Because both of these images show this underlying implication that there's a linearity, there's some sort of a linear thing going on with your career. And I think that creates a lot of stress for people, and they're trying to figure out what moves to make, because they're trying to figure out, how do I increase the slope of something, but what is that thing? So the typical approach, whichever one of these you subscribe to, tends to be that you kind of wait till you're unhappy. This is looking at most people's stories that we hear. And when you realize you're unhappy, you kind of look around and you try to find other opportunities, and you'll apply to a few things, and then you'll see which ones you get and kind of cross your fingers, and then you hear and back, and then of the ones that you got, you'll kind of pick the best one and hope that it works and move into that one, and then kind of just repeat the cycle. Wait till you're unhappy and then do the same thing again. And there's a couple reasons why, if you're just trying to increase your salary over time, that can work pretty well. You just use that as your peg to always go to the next big salary, but having a bigger salary doesn't make you happy. So if your goal is meaningful work and fulfillment in your work, that's actually not a very good strategy. And there's basically three reasons. The first is that people don't know what they're actually looking for. They don't know what they're aiming for in this progression towards meaningful work. They have a feeling that they want it, but they don't have a concrete thing to go after, which we'll talk more about in a second. The second thing is they tend to take really personally, when they apply to things and don't get them, they take it personally, and it kind of can get into their psyche, get into their confidence in it. It kind of messes with their relationship with their work. But the third, and this is the most important one, is that it takes a lot of time. So the learning cycle around what you want to do and what you're good at and what the market wants to pay you for can be years if you're using this idea of, I'm gonna wait to get into their job to test out and see, and kind of this kind of thing. So we're gonna talk about that in a few minutes as well. So the result is that for most people, their careers, especially if they're interested in meaningful work, tend to be a series of not entirely arbitrary, but kind of arbitrary moves that at best are gradually improving, and at worst are just a series of things that don't fulfill them. So and then the reality, as I said, is that there's really nothing very linear about your career. The reality is that it's much more like a field of stepping stones. And you can imagine this is sort of like a pizza cut out of a whole 360 thing, where you're standing in the middle and you can actually move in any direction. You can take all kinds of different jobs. But the question is, which stones can you step on to get closer to something that we call a North Star that is actually that sweet spot of meaningful work for you? Say, okay, that's fair enough. But the question is, well, what is that North Star? This is the concrete thing to aim for. What is that? So the second insight is that the anatomy of meaningful work, or the ingredients of meaningful work, are actually pretty straightforward, and they have a key pattern to them that makes it more possible to find them. So this is from the research like Dan Pink, who wrote Drive, Cal Newport, who wrote So Good They Can't Ignore You, Ben Casnocha, who wrote The Startup of You, and even Tony Hsieh, who wrote Delivering Happiness, which is basically that if you have these three things, these are the ingredients that fulfill people. And purpose being a higher mission, I like to think of it as a sense of legacy of whether it's on a project or over your career, how is the world going to be different after you've done your work? Mastery is getting better and better at skills and things that you want to be good at. I think of it as almost like a Zen thing, like Jedi or like samurai or like blacksmith. Like how do you're like so connected to your sort of craft that it's like part of you. And control is basically saying you get to pick who you work with, what you work on, the way that you work. So maybe, remote work, structure, and also how much you get paid so you can have the lifestyle that you want to have. I think about control as having freedom. So our insight is that that's in the research, but from doing our interviews and so the pattern recognition that we've seen is that there's a certain order to which if you pursue these things, you're more likely to wind up having all three and sooner, which is that if you can figure out the purpose piece, like what you want to be working on, and let that guide what skills you want to get really good at, and then in turn kind of trade those in terms of market rates for more higher pay and more control, that's the best way to do it. So purpose guides mastery, which unlocks control. Because the thing is, your purpose is not a monolithic thing. It changes over time. You could have more than one. Like it's sort of whatever you're passionate about. You need the control factor to go hunt down your purpose again when it floats away. Like the ability to take time off to go volunteer or to meet new people or network or maybe not get paid for months at a time as you search. Like those are the things that let people track down their purpose again and repeat the cycle. So the idea is to move along the stones in such a way that each move you make either further elicits your purpose or deepens your mastery or gives you more control, or ideally all three. But the question is, so you have some people who basically excel at this. You see them out there who they're doing great work, they're really deeply fulfilled with it, it kind of moves them, you can tell they never have to look for a job. And you have other people who, despite having the passion, never figured out, like they're always kind of seeking or looking or kind of confused. So the question is, what's the biggest difference? Like what's the difference between those two people? So what we've seen is that the biggest difference, and this is the third insight, is that those who are successful, especially those who are successful earlier, view their career as a grand experiment. And we use that term very, very precisely, so I'll talk about both words. So the experiment part is that everything that you think you know about what you're good at, what you want to be doing, or what will fulfill you, what the market wants to pay for, how organizations operate, what hiring managers are looking for, all those things are hypotheses, they're assumptions. And like any hypotheses, any experiment, they can be validated or invalidated by collecting information. So whether that's primary information by you actually trying something, or whether it's secondary by talking to somebody, the right person, and asking the right questions, you can actually figure out whether you're more or less right or more or less wrong about all those things without having to take a whole new job. So the second thing is, the faster that you test those assumptions, the more you learn in the same amount of time. So for somebody who's, like I said, who's taking, instead of a whole year or two to get into a new industry and sector and realize something about it that they don't like, that can actually be learned in months or even weeks or even days with the right questions to the right people. And so the last part of the experiment is the taking it personally thing. Good scientists don't take it personally at all when they're wrong about their hypotheses. In fact, actually better scientists tend to be wrong more. So there's a healthy disconnect from well, I'm just seeing what I'm a good fit for and not. And it kind of does away with this whole idea of having to apply and get rejected, because the people who are treating their careers in this sense, and they kind of almost act like journalists, like they're always out talking to people, always outsourcing information, those people tend to not have to apply to jobs. Because they're actually talking to the hiring manager 2 months before the job's even posted, before they're even hiring, because they're talking to the right person at the right time, figuring out that fit. So it does away with that whole kind of rejection thing as well. I want to make sure that I don't skip that. And the last piece is the word grand. It's a grand experiment. So we think it's really important actually to keep the word grand, because that keeps the sense of sort of majesty and mystery of adventure. Because at the end of the day, your career, in this day and age, is your life. This is your chance to figure out what it is you're here to do, what you like to do, and explore it. So it should be this sort of, it shouldn't be a highly pressurized kind of race to something. It's much more of an ongoing exploration. So I hope that, I'm going to wrap up now, but I hope that it will leave you with that these insights are actionable. Like the research shows, this is totally doable to achieve meaningful work. And if you're somebody who's on that path, we wish you the best of luck, and don't stop. And along the way, don't settle.